This is not anchoring.
Yeah, they're in stock. I think they're in garage.
That was thermite, by the way.
This is.
Nice.
Oh my god.
Let me explain. Anchoring is not about sitting on site, it's actually about supporting your team. Now, yes, there is a difference here. You can be an anchor that actually goes around and gets a bunch of kills. You don't have to be an anchor that just sits on site holding random angles, or using random utility. I know that can get boring, which is why you're probably not doing it correctly if you do find it boring. Anchoring is more about the actual position that you're playing, and much less the playstyle. This is why people are still able to frag out with Warden even if they're playing on site, because it's much more about your playstyle than it is about actually where you're playing, which is contrary to what you might think anchoring actually means, because the whole point of it being anchoring is that you're anchored to the site, right? But that's not really necessarily the case. Let me bring you into a custom game to explain this. So right now we're on Basement of Chalet. Let's take Smoke for example. Pretend maybe you have a shield here or an Azami, or maybe you're just playing bottom metal to shoot anybody that tries to come in the wall or anybody outside of it trying to kill you. It's a very good position if you're anchoring. Well, just because you're an anchor doesn't mean that you have to sit on site and just hold this angle and just worry about blue stairs, because as an anchor, as long as you're supporting your team that's on site, you can go off site as long as you have the intent of supporting your team, because like I said, it's much more about your playstyle than the actual position that you're sitting in. So I could, support my team by holding a wall. I could support my team by throwing a smoke grenade for blue stairs, but I also could support my team by walking up the stairs and getting a kill onto anybody that's on vert. I could support my team by walking up and killing somebody with a shotgun on the main stairs. I could support my team by walking up to the main window and killing people here. You can still frag out and get kills above the site even when you're off site as an anchor, because anchoring again is about the play style of supporting your team and much less about the position that you're playing. I will reiterate that as many times as it takes. You just want to be supporting your team. The easiest way to support your team typically is with utility, which is why you have utility heavy operators that are anchors most of the time. Operators like Smoke, Mute, Azami, Fenrir are all anchoring operators, and they all use their utility to support their team. But as you know, you can be very aggressive with operators like Azami and Fenrir, swinging off of their utility whenever necessary. Does that mean that they're suddenly now a roamer because they're more aggressive? No, because again, it's much more about the playstyle of just supporting your team with a utility than it is about just where you're sitting, right? Same thing goes for Smoke. Smoke is a tad bit more passive. What Smoke allows you to do is hold off two angles at once. If, let's say, again, you're sitting behind this bomb and you're trying to hold off the blue rush and the wall rush, you can use a smoke grenade on one, like right here, so that you can peek the other. And essentially, now you're able to hold off two places at once because you used a piece of utility. That's what you're meant to do as anchoring. You're not meant to just sit and hold an angle and, hope to God that someone walks into your crosshair. You're meant to use utility and your positioning to help your team. Another thing that you should be consciously doing whenever you're anchoring instead of just holding an angle is getting on cameras, which is my second tip. Within the first 30 seconds of the round, because you're sitting on site and you're not actually getting in any gunfights or doing much at all within the first 30 seconds, you want to just get on default camera. When you get on default cameras, specifically the ones that are outside, whichever one gets shot first is obviously the one that the attacker spawned at, right? So now you know based off of which camera died first where the attackers are rushing. So you can tell your roamers, hey, they're doing an XYZ push, and now your roamers know exactly where to roam so that you don't have a Caveira that's on the complete opposite side of the map not doing anything. And now you have all of your roamers in position to waste the most amount of time and get the most amount of kills. And all it took was you getting on cameras in the first 30 seconds and giving one single call out. It's that easy. This can ensure that you get a lot of kills early round, and it can ensure that you and your teammates know how and where to defend to get an easy round win. It's a great thing to do. Now, not only should you be supporting your roamers by getting on cameras, but you should be supporting your roamers in general, which is my third tip. Like I said, anchoring is not all about sitting on site. You can even leave the site and support your roamer, but as long as you're matching the playstyle of supporting them with utility, then you're still considered an anchor and a support operator. There are many ways that you can support your roamers as an anchor. You can support them by, like we said last tip, getting on your cameras. You can support them by, we said with the first tip, which is using utility. But you can also support them by just being an extra person that's there and applying ghost pressure. If you're sitting there and you're making your presence known by even just pre-firing, holding an angle, maybe they're droning you, whatever it may be, now they have to deal with two people near the site instead of only dealing with one person, which they're easily able to just flood and take control of. As an anchor, even if you're not completely off-site and you use that basement stairs example, if you just show your presence to make your roamers actually have somebody play with them, it completely changes the pace of the roam clear, and it helps your roamers be a lot more confident going into gunfights, which, as you may know, can win or lose you a gunfight. Now, it's easier said than done with certain operators. If you're a 3 armor, it's a lot harder for you to go help your operators that are roaming, as opposed to somebody who is a 2 armor 2 speed, which is why my number 4th tip is so important: operator selection. Like I said, there are more support operators that can anchor than you might think. Warden can easily anchor. He has a deployable shield and he's a 3 armor, so he can hold angles reliably and take a lot of bullets without him necessarily being able to die as easily as someone like a 1 armor. But just because someone is a 3 armor doesn't mean they necessarily should be anchoring. Warden is a good example of this. Warden's a 3 armor, but no one is anchoring as Warden. They're all roaming. So that being said, if there's certain exceptions to the anchoring rule, and anchoring is not about what speed you are, but the playstyle that you play, then who is an anchor? Well, I'll go over all of them right now. Well, we've already talked about Smoke. He's a great anchor. Mute is more or less the exact same as Smoke. You're just going to have to be a tad bit more passive with him because his utility is primarily used in the prep phase, so you can't really use utility to help out your roamers, which means you need to be just a tad bit more passive with him. Doc is a good anchor. You sit on site, you hold long angles with a 1.5 times scope, and you heal your teammates. Rook, same exact thing, except you can be a little bit more aggressive with him due to the fact that if you die, everybody still has the healing that you put down in the prep phase. Tachanka, same thing as Smoke, except you want to be a little bit less aggressive due to the fact that people can just push through your fire pretty easily. Bandit is an anchor for the simple reason that you have to be on site to bandit trick with him. Echo is an anchor. You want to be using his cameras on site to get free kills, so you want to be very, very aggressive with him. Mira is an anchor. You put her stuff on site and you play off the stuff. It's pretty easy. Maestro is an anchor. Same thing as Mira. Cade is an anchor. Same reason as Bandit. You want to be Cade tricking. Wamai is an anchor. You want to be anchoring as Wamai with your utility. Because of the fact that he has your rechargeable ability and anchors stay alive the longest, you can get the most amount of Wamai magnets in the round by staying alive the longest if you anchor, which is why I recommend you anchor as him. But because he's a 2 speed, 2 health like we talked about earlier, you can be aggressive and maybe help your roamers out a bit, especially in the early round, and then rotate back to site and play more like an anchor later. Melusi is just like Smoke. You put down her utility so that you can cover multiple places without having to actually look at them while you look at somewhere else. It's zoning at its finest. Aruni, same exact thing. Azami is also an anchor, but you can make very aggressive angles with her that you can peek off of to get a lot more kills than you'd be able to do with other anchors. Same exact thing with Fenrir. And then finally we have the new operator, Turborao, which you use in tandem with Cade or Bandit to keep the wall closed. But that's really all of the operators that you want to be anchoring with. Now that you know which operators you can anchor with and how to anchor with each operator, let's go over my 5th tip, which is learning when to be aggressive. Like I keep reiterating, anchoring is much more about your playstyle than it is about your actual position. And your playstyle in terms of how aggressive you are can easily change depending on what happens in the round. If you're down in man count, you want to get super aggressive, especially if you're an anchor, to even out that man count so you don't get swarmed and bum rushed on the site. If you're up in man count, meaning you have more people on your team than the enemy team, then you want to play passive, because as a defender, people have to come to you, so there's no reason to peek and risk a gunfight that you might be able to lose when you could just waste time holding an angle, because like I said, they have to come to you, so just waste as much time as possible and play passive when you're up in man count. If you have the same man count on your team as the enemy team, then you want to be playing passive just like if you were up in man count. Now, learning when to be aggressive is great, but there are certain exceptions to this rule, and even when you are aggressive or passive, where do you even play to be aggressive and to be passive? Well, my 6th tip, learning when to position and hold angles, will solve this issue for you. To explain this, I brought you to Basement on Clubhouse with the new operator, Turborao. Now, if you want to learn when to hold angles, you of course need to go back to the other tip, learning when to be aggressive. The only time you would unironically hold an angle when you're an anchor is typically for information. This angle right here is great if you sit in front of the box, because then you're not exposed to the dirt door or the blue door. It's very, very nice. But if you hold this tight angle just like this, you're not necessarily going to get many kills, but you'll see when somebody walks across your doorway. When this happens, now you have information of anyone's main stairs. So when in doubt, if you're a defender and you kind of don't know what to do in terms of holding angles, what you should hold, just hold little information peaks just like this. Now, in terms of when to hold other angles, if you want to hold maybe something more aggressive that can get you some more kills, then the only other time I would hold an angle is if you're not on cams. And the only time you shouldn't be on cams as an anchor is if you have another anchor on cams, because as an anchor, you really should just be on cams, something I'll talk about later in the video. But in the perfect scenario where you're not in the middle of a gunfight, you're not using utility somewhere, and somebody else is already on cams for you, then you would just passively hold an angle, because the unfortunate truth about angering is you're not going to get into too many gunfights, which means you really shouldn't be holding too many angles and trying to get a lot of kills. Let your roamers and your more aggressive players do that instead. So in terms of when to hold angles, you honestly shouldn't be doing it that often, unless of course all the prerequisites that I mentioned earlier have been checked off. Something else you should learn the timing of is learning when to just let them have the bomb site and plant so that you and your team can play for a retake, which is my next tip. Basement of Clubhouse is a great example of this, because if they drop the hatch right here, they have people people in dirt, they have people on main stairs, the chances of you being able to stop that plant is very, very low. But if you go ahead and let them go for their plant, you go ahead and let those smoke grenades run out so that you can maybe get a bit more aggressive, then it becomes a lot easier of a thing to do to retake than it is to just stop their plant in its tracks. Because when you let them plant and you go for a retake, when you let them plant, all the people that were covering them for the plant won't be covering them for the post plant, because they're all going to back up and play a lot more passive due to the fact that they have the bomb down. So letting them plant in certain circumstances is very beneficial for you, because it gives your team time to calm down, reassess, and replan for the future of the post plant. It also gives your roamers time to come back to site if they need to flank anybody that may be holding the plant. It's a very good thing and smart thing to do. But when should you actually be doing it? Well, honestly, it's very site dependent. Clubhouse overall is a great example of this, because Clubhouse is a tad bit attacker sided when it comes to getting the bomb down. If they have main hatch control, dirt control, and main stairs control, there's just no possible way that you're stopping that plant unless you have a bunch of plant denial utility in the site. The same thing goes for Cash and CC. If they have the wall open and they have someone on the wall, and then they also have rafters control, there's absolutely nothing stopping them from just planting right here, baiting out your nitro cell, and getting the bomb down for absolutely free. So this again would be a great example of a site that you would just want to play retake on and use your utility maybe to kill and retake anybody that may have gotten the bomb down. An example of a site that's very hard for them to get the bomb down, hence you should not be playing for retakes on this site, would be gym and bedroom. The reason that it's so hard to plant on this site is because if you have head holes, right, let's make a little fake head hole here, and then you have feet holes all along this wall with a rotate here, now you can just have somebody inside of Cash hold these head holes and make sure that no one can hop in from that window, or that window. And nobody will be able to get the bomb down unless they completely clear everybody out of here, which is pretty hard for them to do. Because it's so hard for them to plant typically in most rounds, this would be a great example of a site that you don't want them to be able to play retake for. Another reason you don't want to play retake for this site is because they have so many windows and outside presence that they could easily use to deny anybody trying to defuse the bomb, which makes it very hard for you to retake and defuse the bomb, which is why again you should not be playing retake for this site. So like I said, for this tip specifically, it's so map dependent that just getting experience in the game will better teach you to learn when to play for the post plant and when to play for the retake and when to not do that. Now, that tip, unfortunately, you're just going to have to learn by playing the game more. Something that you can learn even with just a few hours, though, is a tip called zoning. The best way that I can show you zoning is with an operator like Smoke. Now, I briefly talked about this in my Chalet example, but the one thing that sucks about anchoring is that there's so many angles on the site. Let's take Oregon for example. There's the angle on the kids window, there's the angle from the attic rotate, there's the angle from the trophy door, there's the angle from the wall, there's the angle from the white stairs door, there's the angle from the dorms window, there's angles from vert that you have to worry about. There's just a lot of angles, right? So zoning makes this easier because taking a 1v2 or maybe like, you know, a 1v3 because there's 3 angles is really hard to do. But if you use your utility to zone off one area so that you can take the gunfight in another area, that makes what was a 1v2 into just a 1v1. That is zoning. It's mitigating the amount of angles and gunfights that you have to take so that you can take 1v1s instead of 1vx's. It's very smart. And you do this by using utility like Smoke, where as you can see, I smoked off white stairs, so now I can just worry about taking the gunfight for trophy. Maybe I want to, you know, smoke off trophy next, so I can take the gunfight on the kid that's now on white stairs with a shotgun. Boom, get the kill, right? Now you can worry about this. Well, oh no, I killed the guy in white stairs, but there's a guy attic and a guy in trophy. If I don't do something, they're gonna swarm me. Well, guess what? Something called zoning. You zone off trophy, take the attic fight, right? Or take the fight on the rotate, whatever it may be. But you can use utility like that to zone off one person and then take the fight with the other person. You can do this with Goyo, you can do this with Chonka, you can do this with nitro cells, you can do it with smoke grenades on attack, and many other options. You can do it with Azami, right? You put an Azami there so they can't see you, you take the gunfight, right? Boom, easy. But zoning as an anchor is very, very important for you to know because there's so many angles on site that can see where you're positioning because you're just kind of a sitting duck that you'll be almost dead every single round if you don't use it. Not only can zoning get you a lot of kills, something that's super simple that you can implement into your games instantaneously though is literally just holding longer angles. So let's take this super common Azami strat for example, right? You'll have an Azami right here, and you'll have an Azami on top of that Azami. And now, as Azami, you can just prone right next to this doorway, and you can shoot people's feet when they drop the hatch or they peek the doorway. You pair this up with barbed wire next to the Azami to slow them down when they try to knife it, and it's a free kill every single time. It's great. The issue with this, though, is if you're prone right here and you're holding this angle, the people who walk up right here can see your shoulder because you're so close to the doorway. But if you were to hold a longer angle and you were to back up, this now is not an issue at all. They can't see you because you're not close to the door frame. The way perspective works in this game and even in real life is if you're close to something and you're trying to peek, they now can see half of your body and you can't see them at all. But if you were to back up, now they only see half of your body when you peek, and you're a much harder target to hit because you're smaller on the screen due to the fact that you're just farther away. With how perspective works and how ping works and how bullet drop off works, holding longer angles will always be your friend when it comes to winning gunfights. So you should definitely do it as an anchor, especially because holding angles is something that you as an anchor do a lot. Speaking of something that you do a lot as an anchor, my final tip about being an anchor is when in doubt, just get on cam. Now, I talked about this when I was talking about like when do you position and hold angles, because as an anchor, your first instinct should just be getting on cameras. Let's take, again, a zombie, for example. If I put in a zombie barricade right here, let's say I put one right here that I can peek off of, and now I have like, you know, a pretty okay zombie setup, you know, maybe one right here, I guess. Sure, that'll work. Now I'm playing on site as a zombie, and I can easily use some angles here to get some free kills. The issue with me playing as a zombie on site, though, is that it's going to take them probably 30 seconds to a minute to clear out all my roamers, clear out all the utility, and then get to site. So until then, I'm just sitting here holding angles, not doing anything for my team. If you want to do something for your team, though, if you're anchoring directly on site, just get on cameras. Give them information, give them pings, tell the roamers, hey, they're pushing here so they can get there, and just do that. Now, I talked about in my first tip, getting on cameras for the first 30 seconds. But for this tip specifically, you want to be getting on cameras for most of the entire round, to be completely honest. You just want to be getting on cameras. Sure, if you're taking gunfights, people are swarming the site, you don't want to be on cameras, right? You have to be pretty tasteful with it. But if you have other anchors or other defenders that are kind of like shooting them before they're shooting you because they're just closer to where the attackers are, and you find yourself just holding angles and not doing anything for more than 5 seconds, get on a camera. Why not? Get on a camera. If you're safe and you're not doing anything for 5 seconds, that's the golden rule. 5 seconds, get on cameras. It's that easy. With that out of the way though, that's it for this video. Check out the next video and I'll see y'all later.